Focus is not about doing more. It's about doing the right things. I want to encourage you to start asking yourself, where do I need to be focusing? What is the first step towards my practice growing? Story about Steve Jobs. In the late 1990s, when Jobs returned back to Apple, the company was on the brink of collapse. Jobs famously walked into a meeting with the top executives and he asked one simple question. What are the 4 most important things that we should be doing? The room went completely silent. Jobs made a really radical decision. He cut the product line down to just 4 key areas. Now, by narrowing the focus and concentrating all the company's resources on just a few things they could truly excel at, the company turned around completely. Now, the result was Apple launched groundbreaking products like the iMac and later on the iPhone, and they revolutionized industries and became one of the most successful companies in all of history. Now, what was the turning point? It was focus. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Marketing You Practice podcast, the podcast where I have the pleasure of simplifying the marketing and the mindset so you, the chiropractor, can increase your income, your impact, and your enjoyment in practice too. In today's fast-paced world, growing a successful practice requires more than just skills and knowledge. It requires focus, the ability to be able to concentrate on the things that matter most without getting distracted by every shiny object. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking to you about why focus is crucial for growth. I'm going to be sharing with you what chiropractors should be focusing on to achieve this growth, and I'll share with you how you can avoid distractions. Now, let me start with a story that maybe you're familiar with, a story about Steve Jobs. In the late 1990s, when Jobs returned back to Apple, the company was on the brink of collapse. They had way too many products, way too many distractions, and a real lack of clear vision. Jobs famously walked into a meeting with the top executives and he asked one simple question. What are the 4 most important things that we should be doing? The room went completely silent. You see, at this point, Apple had dozens of products across various markets there, but nothing was great. Jobs made a really radical decision. He cut the product line down to just 4 key areas. Now, by narrowing the focus and concentrating all the company's resources on just a few things they could truly excel at, the company turned around completely. Now, the result was Apple launched groundbreaking products like the iMac and later on the iPhone, and they revolutionized industries and became one of the most successful companies in all of history. Now, what was the turning point? It was focus. Jobs wasn't all about doing more. He was about doing less and doing it better. He cut out the distractions and he honed in on what mattered most for Apple's survival and his success. So why am I sharing this story with you? Because growing your practice isn't about doing everything and being everywhere, okay? It's about focusing on what will truly move the needle. Now, for Jobs, focus meant cutting out the excess and honing in on what Apple could be best at. Now, for you, as a chiropractor, focus means understanding the key areas that will grow your practice and staying disciplined in those areas there too. Now, to support this idea, let's look at some of the research out there. Harvard Business Review found that companies that focus on a few core strategies outperform competitors by 42% in revenue growth and also sustainability. These businesses were all about streamlining their operations and eliminating distractions there too. Jim Collins, the author of the best-selling book Good to Great, found that companies that excelled long-term did so because they adopted what he refers to as a hedgehog concept. This means they focused on the one thing that they could be best at, and they built everything around this single focus. The companies, however, that strayed from this core focus, chasing multiple strategies, were more likely to fall behind or fail completely. So the data is clear. Businesses that focus on few areas but do them really, really well experience way more growth, higher profitability, and better marketing position than those that spread themselves too thin. Now, the challenge that then comes about is, what should I be focusing on, okay? So let's simplify things. I want you to imagine a triangle, and inside this triangle sits your practice growth. A thriving practice sits in the inside of it, and if we want to turn that dream into reality, there's only 3 things that we need to master around the outside of this triangle. The first of these, and these are all in an order, okay, so we need to master all 3 of these, and the order is important, is message and broadcast, okay? So this first area that demands our focus, if you want to build a thriving practice, is about message and broadcast. This is all about how do you communicate with your audience and potential patients It's the story that you're telling, and it's how you're positioning yourself. It's how you're getting your message out there, okay? So some key things to think about here is defining your core message, okay? What is it that makes you unique? What's the main idea that you want your community to associate with your practice, whether it's holistic care, family health, wellness? Could it be non-surgical spinal decompression, laser? It doesn't matter what it is, but you just have to choose something, okay? Now, many chiropractors struggle because their messaging is scattered and unclear. If your audience doesn't understand what you do and why you do it, they will not engage. So this means you need to focus on crafting a message that resonates with your ideal patients, okay? Now, the second part of this triangle here is broadcasting effectively, all right? So we're still on that first side of the triangle. This is using the right platforms to get your message out. Social media, email, podcasts, webinar, community talks, internal referrals, you name it. The goal here is to be where your ideal patients are and to consistently engage with them, okay? So if your practice focuses on families, it's going to be about creating content that speaks to their needs. Maybe it's parenting tips or advice on stress and wellness for kids. This is the sort of message that you should be putting out there, okay? So that's side number one of the triangle there. Key element here is message and broadcast. Now, in a moment, I'm going to take you through a series of questions that will really help you articulate, do I have mastery in around this area or do I need to go back? But first of all, I just want to overview these 3 growth strategies. The second is conversion and retention, okay? This is where our marketing efforts translate into patient appointments and, more importantly, where you keep patients coming back. Now, without solid conversion and retention, your practice won't have consistent growth. If our conversion and retention isn't great, it puts a lot of pressure on our marketing, okay? So let's define these a little more. Conversion, how do you turn your potential leads into patients? Now, this could and should be through well-structured consultations, a compelling first visit, clear explanation of the value that you deliver, okay? Now, I often see chiropractors struggling with their initial consultations. It's crucial on the initial visit here for you to establish trust and demonstrate expertise right away. So you need to be focusing on mastering this consultation flow. Make sure it's really clear, it's patient-centered, and it leaves no doubt in the mind of the person that you're seeing the benefits of your care. Now, retention, this is all about building long-term relationships. This means patients need to feel valued, not just on their first appointment, but on their 21st and their 121st, okay? So retention isn't just about getting people to come back. It's about making sure they feel seen and heard, okay? This is something that your team and everybody across the board should be, how do we make our patients feel seen and heard? Okay, how do we make sure that their progress is acknowledged and that their care is personalised to their needs? Nobody wants to feel like they're on a conveyor belt, okay? Consistent follow-ups, well checks, personalised communication, this is the key here. So that's that second side of the triangle that we need mastery around. First, we need mastery in around message and broadcast. Next, it's conversion and retention. And then the final side of this triangle is all around systems and leadership, okay? The first 2 areas, message and conversion, are about growth. This third area here is about sustainability. Now, without solid systems in place, your practice won't scale, and it's almost guaranteed that you'll become burned out or exhausted, okay? Now, every successful practice runs on systems. This includes everything from how you onboard your new patients to how you schedule follow-ups, collect payments, how you handle your marketing. A well-run practice doesn't rely on doing everything manually, okay? So you should have automated systems for reminders, follow-up emails, how do they schedule their appointments. This will not only save you time, but it means that everything gets followed through, nothing falls into the crack. And by leadership, as your practice grows, you're likely going to bring on staff and maybe even other chiropractors. Leadership means that you're setting a vision for your team and you're creating a culture of care and excellence that aligns with your practice values. We've just spent this last 4 weeks inside of Community Influencer talking all about culture. Okay, so culture, the way I often describe this, in the same way that if we're running an experiment, we choose what the culture is inside the petri dish because that'll choose what grows. The culture that you have, whilst it's often invisible, it encourages or discourages certain behaviors. All right, now we need to make sure that we're designing our culture, and it takes leadership in order for you to do this. Okay, so good leadership isn't just about managing people, it's about inspiring your team. It makes sure that everybody in the practice understands the mission and the values. It's all about leading with example, okay? So focusing on these 3 areas, messaging and broadcast, conversion, retention, systems, and leadership. This will create a really solid foundation for sustainable practice growth. And it's not about doing everything perfectly. It's about mastering these 3 core areas to ensure long-term success. So, which of these 3 areas should you be focusing on? Now, the mistake that most chiropractors make is they focus on the one they enjoy the most or that they're already the best at. I was sharing a story on the podcast recently about a chiropractor who was continuing to dive into his conversion and retention, yet what he needed to be working on was message and broadcast. Okay, he was already good enough at this stage of his practice. His conversion rates were great. His retention was good. What he needed was more new patients. Now, I have others of my clients that, again, their marketing is great, their conversion, retention, but they're exhausted and their team is an absolute schmozzle. It's not about going back in there and continuing to work on the things that we enjoy doing. Sometimes what we have to do is we have to lean into where is the discomfort, okay? Now, as I mentioned beforehand, we need to look at these practice growth pathways as linear, which means we need to have mastery in around message and broadcast before we move on to conversion and retention, okay? So we can't be great at conversion and retention if we don't have new patients coming in, okay? And we can't be building a great team if we can't afford to pay them. And so we need to make sure that we get these organized. Now, I've got some questions I'm going to ask you here in each of these 3 categories. They're going to be simple yes or no questions. And until you can get yeses for them, you can't move on to the next section. This would how I would encourage you in terms of where you need to be focusing on, okay? So question 1, can you clearly and confidently articulate why patients should choose you? Now, this is not about you being the best chiropractor in the area, but it is about being the right chiropractor for a specific group of people. If your practice members are going to travel past other practices, they need to know why you are the perfect fit for them. Now, whether it's family wellness, whether it's, complicated pediatric cases, whether it's athletes, chronic pain, whether it's whatever it is, you need to be able to explain this confidently and succinctly, okay? So until you can do this, this is where you need to spend your time looking at things like who do we serve and how do we serve them? What is our core value proposition for these people? Question number 2 is this: once we've got that sorted and we can confidently say why people should come and see us, then it's about telling the world about that. This is broadcast. So are you constantly marketing this message to your community, and is your marketing effective at bringing in new patients? A clear message is only valuable if it's reaching the right people. This build it and they will come is the biggest load of rubbish, and it causes more chiropractors more pain than almost any other idea that's been sold inside of chiropractic, okay? If we want to have a really great business, we need to clarify what our message is, and then we need to market the heck out of it, okay? BJ said early to bed, early to rise, work like hell, and advertise. He understood this as well, okay? Now, again, this could be through social media, email campaigns, local community events, other advertising efforts. It doesn't matter where. It just means that you look for an avenue that's effective for you. I've got many chiropractors saying, I don't want to be on social media. I'm like, great, you do not have to be on social media. I'm working with lots of people who grow the practice by other means, but you just need to choose a means that is effective. And this means, where are your people and can you get in front of them? Okay, so those 2 questions. When you get a hell yes on both of those, we can move into the next area. So if you're a no on either of those, your focus needs to be getting towards a hell yes on that. So the second area is conversion and retention. So are you converting and keeping your patients? Question number 1 is this: do more than 80% of your new patients get through to their 12-visit re-exam? Okay, that should be minimum standard. Of the people that come into you, are 80% of them getting through to their new patient re-exam? Now, again, most practices are doing this somewhere in around visit 12. Now, this question evaluates how effective your initial consultations are at converting curiosity or one-time visits into commitment for care. Now, notice, when I'm talking about conversion is the new patient visit and the report of findings. In fact, I think if you do the new patient visit right, the report of findings is almost effortless. If you're losing more than 20% of your patients before the re-exam, there's most likely a disconnect between what you're offering and what the patient perceives as valuable. Okay, so that's how we're measuring our conversion there too. Now, question 2. Is your patient visit average more than 36 visits? Again, I've set this bar down low. By the time I finished in practice, my PVA was, well north of 140. It was 150 visits there too, okay? But it didn't start at that, okay? This also depends where you are in your practice there, okay? So if your patients aren't staying long enough for them to experience the real benefits there too, or if your PVA is lower, it's a signal that patients aren't seeing value in continued care, okay? We must be working on retention. Remember I said beforehand, if we haven't got our conversion and our retention nailed, we're putting a lot of extra stress on our marketing. Again, I'm speaking with chiropractors every week telling me they need to work on their marketing, and they're already getting, between 8 and 10 new patients a week. So this is not a marketing problem that you have. You have a conversion and a retention problem. Let's not work at marketing. Let's get really good at visit 1 and visit 2, your re-exams, your daily interactions, okay? So if you're not meeting these benchmarks, so if we've got a hell yes for messaging and broadcast, but we've got some no's in this is where our focus needs to be, and we do not move on anywhere else until we can get this to a hell yes, okay? So this is critical. Conversion and retention is critical to sustaining long-term practice growth. Your success depends not only on just attracting new patients, but keeping them engaged, okay? So what about if you've got a hell yes on those first 2 sections? Let's look at systems and leadership. Is your practice running smoothly and efficiently? Do you have, question number 1, consistently followed up, so written and consistently followed procedures for your key tasks in your office? This is everything from answering the phone, conducting a report of findings, new patient walkthroughs, the things that happen with repetition in your practice. Do you have written and consistently followed procedures for these? So standard procedures ensure that every task in your office is done the same way every time, no matter who is doing it, okay? It's reproducibility. This consistency leads to smoother operations, fewer mistakes, and better overall patient experience. Now, again, there's 2 components of those, because I know many of you have written systems there too. You're just not following them, okay? Question number 2 is this. Do all of your staff, including the associates as well as the CAs, have clearly written job descriptions with key performance indicators and regular performance reviews? This is, do your staff know what's expected of them? Okay, now once they know what's expected of them, there needs to be key performance indicators. Now this is, thinking of it as a little bit like a test. If I'm going to give you some homework to do and then I'm going to tell you that you're never going to be tested on it, you're not going to be all that focused on reading it. You're not going to be retaining it if I'm never going to test you on it. So if I'm going to say to our staff, this is how we do a recall, this is how we ring them, this is how we troubleshoot through that, and our KPI is 60% of patients that we call is that we need to make sure that they're calling, that we're booking them in for an appointment. Okay, this is how we get better at stuff. So we need to have KPIs. Then along the way, what we need to have is regular performance reviews. Now, these regular performance reviews, when I was talking about this in our culture training, this is not about being punitive or about punishing, but this is about supporting people. Okay. And once that culture set up there too, that people are allowed to fail. There's a growth mindset. They're not going to be punished if they don't reach their KPIs. They're going to be supported. They're going to be encouraged. You're going to be a cheerleader. You're going to be a champion for them. Then these 3 things all aligned, clearly written job description, key performance indicators, and regular performance reviews. This drives a culture, a winning culture, where it won't be just about what you do, but the whole staff will be all pulling in the same direction there too, okay? So if your office doesn't have reproducible systems, if your team members aren't working on clear job descriptions, KPIs, if there's not a focus on building these foundational elements there as well, your practice is going to really struggle. It'll be likely leave you exhausted, burnt out, and it'll be impossible for you to scale your practice, okay? So we're going to use those questions, and maybe this is going to take a couple of listens to show you where you should be focusing, okay? So now we know where we should be focusing. How do we go about minimizing distractions, okay? So I want to share something with you that has really transformed the way that I run my business and the way I teach a lot inside of Community Influencers, and this is a 6-week planning cycle. Now, I've been loving strategic planning for years, probably decades. Now, I started off with yearly goals and then I moved to quarterly goals as well. But in the last 2 years, I've achieved more than ever before with less stress and more focus by moving to a 6-week planning cycle. Now, yes, I still have really clear goals about where I want to be in 12 months' time. But I break everything down into 6-week cycles. Now, this approach has given me a greater sense of ease and has helped me to minimize distractions, because trying to focus for these long periods, even 90-day cycles and particularly kind of year cycles as well, I had this kind of waning in terms of energy as well. So the first thing is why 6-week cycles there as well is because of focus and energy, okay? In a 90-day cycle, what typically would happen to me is I would start off the first month, I'd be really focused, I'd be working at things, and then there would be a period in the middle there too where I'd lose a little bit of focus, and then towards the end, I'd get back on it, and I'd end up having to really sprint towards the end, and it was never enjoyable for me. There was always a sense of exhaustion, okay? When I moved to a 6-week cycle, what I found is I could stay focused for that length of time. So there was a flexibility, there was a reduced pressure that came along as well. Now, this also meant in this 6-week cycle, because invariably, and there's been a couple of 6-week cycles already in this first kind of 3/4 of the year where I've had to wipe them out completely. My mum got not well earlier on in the year, and it was just a complete blowout. I didn't get any of my projects finished, but it was only a 6-week cycle. Now, had that been a 90-day cycle there too, I've blown out a whole quarter of a year. But I can reset again after 6 weeks. It might mean I need to change my goals around a little there too, but I can just get straight back onto it. So that real flexibility in there too. And I always follow a 6-week cycle up with a rest week, okay? So a rest week at the end where I do nothing. I have no coaching calls. We go away as a family there too. I disconnect, and it's a level of reward for working really hard. It gives me time to reflect on what I want to do next. And so when that next cycle comes around, I can jump in with real energy, okay? So if you're not planning in any form at all, I want you to think about a 6-week cycle, okay? So how do we go about implementing this? Well, step number 1 is to decide on a couple of projects that you want to be working on, okay? Now, we've identified before, maybe it is, okay, what I need to be working on here is my conversion. How am I going to do that? Now, when we're setting out a project here, we need to really clearly clarify what done looks like, okay? So we can't just say, I want to improve my conversion. We want to put a number next to it. So at the moment, if my conversion into patients getting into, 12 visits there too is currently 60%, my goal is to get that to 65%, okay? As a general rule, if you're improving by 10% each 6-week cycle there too, that's a great improvement. Now, can you do it faster than that? Yes. Is it sustainable? Sometimes, but often it's not there too. What we want to do after we've decided on what our goal is and we're really clear on what done looks like is we want to break your goal down into weekly action steps, okay? What are the big things that need to be done? For me to move the needle here, where should I, if I'm going to be here at the end of week 6, where do I need to be at the end of week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6? Now, none of this needs to take any length of time at all. As we're planning out this project, this could be all done in about 20, 25 minutes there too, okay? So what are the clear things? What are the resources I need to get in place? And we can start to identify at this stage here, what are the hurdles that I'm likely to come up against? Now, I've found if I identify the hurdles in advance and I start to ask myself, how can I overcome these hurdles? When inevitably I come to these hurdles, I've already thought about what the solution might be. Now, if I don't think about it in advance and I get stuck, something doesn't go right, my brain is already in fight, flight. I find it hard for me to see myself out of there, okay? Step 1, set a really clear and focused project. Get clear on what done looks like. Step number 2, break it down into weekly steps. And step number 3, make sure that you follow this by a rest week. The rest week at the end is really important because if you're going to work hard for 6 weeks, there needs to be some respite at the other end. If we don't do this and you're going to feel like you're super productive, you want to just get back into it, you will eventually lead to burnout, okay? This 6-week planning cycle is a game changer when it comes to minimizing distractions and keeping yourself on track. It allows you to stay focused, flexible, and energized while avoiding the burnout and the pressure that can come from longer cycles. So if you feel like your current planning system isn't working for you, I want to encourage you to give this 6-week cycle a try. You might find that helps you achieve more in less time with a whole bunch less stress. So let's wrap all of this up. Let's quickly revisit the key points we covered about the importance of focus when it comes to growing your practice. We started with why focus was crucial. We shared the story about Steve Jobs and the Apple turnaround. They were doing way too many things. Nobody knew what were the key things that they should be working on. What is it that matters most? Then we broke it down to focusing. Remember, we built that triangle and we said that your thriving practice sits in around mastery of message and broadcast, conversion, retention, systems, and leadership. I asked you some questions, 2 questions in each of those. We work our way through this from a linear form. We need to have mastery over mastery over message and broadcast before we move on to conversion and retention, before we move on to systems and leadership, okay? And then finally, we talked about minimizing distractions by implementing a 6-week planning cycle. By keeping your focus short and sharp, you can maintain energy, avoid burnout, and you get to build in flexibility when life throws you that curveball as well. So here's what I want you to take from today's episode. Focus is not about doing more. It's about doing the right things. I want to encourage you to start asking yourself, where do I need to be focusing? What is the first step towards my practice growing? And it's probably just going through those questions as well. Okay. So again, refining your message, improving your retention, or maybe it's getting systems in place. Now, if you're ready to dive deeper into mastering these 3 areas and growing your practice with greater focus, then come and check out Community Influence, our coaching program. We do a whole bunch deeper dive on all of this. And as always, thanks for all that you do. Keep saving lives. Your community so desperately needs you to become more focused, because it's that focus there that improves the impact, the lives that you get to change also. All right, folks, until next time, have a brilliant week. See you back here soon. Bye. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out my Community Influencer program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work with you to help you apply it, implement it, and systemize it. The Community Influencer Group Coaching Program is designed to help you increase your practice income, impact, and enjoyment. Join me over at anguspyke.com/join. That's anguspyke.com/join. I'd love to see you there.